Aspen Heights wasn't built for people like Elena Reyes. Perched atop the Colorado mountains, the luxury resort was more fortress than retreat, a place where billionaires escaped responsibility disguised as rest. The lobby gleamed with marble, the fireplaces burned imported cedar, and the silence was curated. It cost $1,200 a night to forget the outside world. Elena walked those silent halls like a ghost in sneakers. She knew the places where cameras didn't reach, the guest patterns, the ones who tipped and the ones who didn't. Her badge read event sanitation, but what she really did was disappear messes before the elite noticed them. She had no degree, no titles, no luxury perfume trailing behind her like the women she scrubbed wine stains for. But she had eyes and memory. That morning, she clocked in early, same as always. She avoided elevators and instead took the back stairwells, where the walls bore faint scratches from staffed carts like hers. She passed room 1701, Carson Hale's suite, and paused. Not because she was nosy, but because something in her got twisted when she thought of him. Carson Hale, founder of Metalytics, the tech giant that promised AI would revolutionize diagnostics. The man whose face had graced fortune and fast company, and who now sat alone in the mountains, avoiding subpoenas and headlines after the recent scandal. She had seen him 3 times since his arrival. Once when he yelled at a valet for touching his luggage. Once when he bumped into her and didn't say sorry. And once, just 3 days ago, when he sat shirtless on his private balcony, unaware she could see the back of his shoulder. That's when she noticed the rash. She didn't mean to. But once you've watched someone you love die from a disease no one believed was real, you never unsee the signs again. A red bullseye, clear edges, inflamed center, exactly like the ones her brother had shown her in medical books when she was still studying nursing. She hadn't touched a textbook in years. Not since the night Gabriel collapsed at the dinner table. Not since the ER doctor said anxiety and sent him home with Advil, and 2 days later, he was gone. But that morning, Elena did something she hadn't done in a long time. She hesitated in front of room 1701. She took a breath, and she knocked. The door opened a crack. Elena froze, gripping the handle of her cleaning cart like it could shield her from whatever storm might come next. Carson Hale stood in the doorway, shirt half-buttoned, eyes bloodshot, like sleep had become a stranger. Even disheveled, he radiated authority, the kind that filled boardrooms and crushed opposing views with a single blink. "Yes," he said, voice raspy. Her throat tightened. This was stupid, dangerous. She was a staff member. He was a guest. She wasn't even supposed to make eye contact, let alone. "There's something on your shoulder," she blurted. "A rash. Red ring. I noticed it 2 days ago. You might want to get it checked." He stared at her like she'd just recited a conspiracy theory. "You're a maid." She felt the sting of it. A simple statement, but one soaked in superiority. "Yes, I am." "Then stay in your lane." And the door shut. Not slammed, just dismissed. Like she was background noise. Elena stood there for several seconds, unsure whether to cry, scream, or laugh at herself for even trying. "You knew better," she told herself. "You always know better." Back in the staff locker room, she shoved her cleaning gloves into her bag and sank onto the bench. Her hands trembled with quiet fury. She didn't want to care. She shouldn't care. But the image of that rash burned behind her eyes like an accusation. Because Carson Hale didn't just have any rash. He had the kind of early warning sign that screamed neurological Lyme if left untreated. Her brother hadn't been so lucky. By the time they caught it, his joints had locked, his brain had fogged, and he couldn't finish sentences without getting lost halfway through. And that's what scared her the most. Because when she looked into Carson's eyes just now, she saw it. The confusion, the mental static. A man used to sharpness, suddenly dulled. That night, Elena returned to her apartment above the resort kitchen and opened a box she hadn't touched in 5 years. Inside were notes from her nursing classes, highlighted textbooks, old stethoscopes. She had dropped out 3 weeks after her brother's funeral. She told people it was financial, that she couldn't afford tuition. But the truth was heavier than that. She hadn't believed she deserved to try saving anyone again. But tonight, for the first time in years, she reopened her brother's medical flashcards and started to remember. Carson Hale had always trusted numbers more than people. He built his empire that way. Analytics over instinct, data over dialogue. Human error was what ruined medicine. He'd said once in an interview, "Let algorithms make the calls. Let emotion get out of the way." But lately, the numbers weren't adding up. He stood in front of the bathroom mirror, staring at his reflection. Something was off. Not just fatigue. Not just stress. Something deeper. A strange fog in his head that wouldn't clear. He couldn't remember the name of his assistant from 5 years ago. The one who had been with him through 3 mergers. His fingers trembled slightly as he adjusted the cuff of his shirt. It had started 2 nights ago. A twitch in his left hand, almost imperceptible at first. Now it was constant. Annoying. He didn't tell anyone, because admitting weakness meant inviting vultures. Downstairs, the resort manager, Mr. Rhodes, greeted him with the kind of smile that only came from working around the ultra-rich for too long. Polite. Hollow. Efficient. "Dr. Knox is en route, sir," he said. "He'll arrive within the hour." Carson nodded. "Keep this discreet." "Of course. Shall I arrange the private dining suite for your meeting?" "Just send him to my room." As Rhodes walked away, Carson exhaled shakily. He told no one the real reason he called Dr. Knox. It wasn't just the fatigue. It wasn't just the joint pain. It was the fear. Twice now, he'd stared at his laptop for an hour without typing a single word. Last night, he'd opened his banking app and forgot the passcode. He'd used the same one for 7 years. Something was wrong. And the worst part? It hadn't even started with him noticing. It had started when a cleaning lady dared to speak. That girl. What was her name again? He didn't know. He hadn't looked at her long enough. But her voice calm, measured, confident it had stuck in his head like a warning siren. "You might want to get that checked." He brushed it off. But now her words echoed louder than the doctors he'd paid fortunes to. And for the first time in his adult life, Carson Hale, the man who always had answers, realized he was afraid of a question he couldn't solve. Dr. Adrian Knox arrived like a storm in silk. Black trench coat, Italian shoes, Rolex gleaming beneath a monogrammed cuff. He didn't belong in a mountain resort. He belonged in a private jet conference room with glass walls and 6-figure invoices. Carson greeted him stiffly at the suite entrance. "You don't look good," Knox said casually, setting down his leather doctor's bag. "But I suppose that's why I'm here." Carson sat heavily on the sofa, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Something's off. My focus is gone. I'm losing words. My hand shakes. I feel scattered." Knox raised a brow and began flipping open the bag. "Stress. You've been under media fire for the past 6 months. Court battles. Investigations. The mind gets tired. It's classic burnout." "I'm not some anxious startup founder," Carson snapped. "I know my baseline." "And your baseline is to assume you're the exception," Knox replied smoothly, attaching a cuff to take Carson's blood pressure. "It's not a bad thing. It's made you a billionaire. But it also means you are not objective about your own limits." Carson looked away. Elena, meanwhile, was quietly organizing supplies in the hallway closet. The doors to the suite were cracked open just enough. She didn't mean to eavesdrop, but the doctor's tone made her gut twist. She knew that voice. She'd heard it before. From the ER resident who said her brother's collapse was just exhaustion. From the supervisor who called her emotional after the funeral. From the professors who told her she was too sensitive for clinical work. It's in your head. You're overreacting. Let the professionals handle it. She leaned closer. Carson's voice was lower now. There's also a rash. My shoulder. A rash. Knox scoffed. You probably got bit by something. This is Colorado. Go for a hike and bugs will greet you like old friends. But it's red. Circular. Knox zipped his bag shut. Look, I can order blood work if you insist. But it'll just show elevated cortisol, maybe some deficiencies. You need sleep. A break. Less caffeine. And the tremor? Stress. Elena's hand clenched around a canister of polish so tightly that her knuckles turned white. She'd heard this exact scene before, and it had ended with her brother's name on a headstone. That night, Elena couldn't sleep. She lay on her narrow twin mattress, staring at the ceiling, the soft hum of the radiator barely covering the sound of her heartbeat. Her mother used to say that silence wasn't always peaceful. Sometimes it was just the sound of truths you didn't want to hear. The doctor wasn't going to help him. She knew that now. She'd watched Carson shrink into himself, day by day. The sharpness in his eyes dimmed. His steps slowed. He forgot his room service order. His coffee went cold in his hands. She knew this pattern. She had lived it. With shaking fingers, she pulled a notepad from her drawer. The pages were old and yellowed, full of doodles from her nursing school days. Acronyms, anatomy diagrams, little phrases her brother used to tease her with. She flipped to a blank page, and she began to write. Please get tested for Lyme disease. The rash on your shoulder resembles an erythema migrans, early stage symptom. Stage 2 can affect your heart and brain. Stage 3 can be irreversible. Someone who cares. She folded the paper in thirds. Simple. Direct. Anonymous. Just before 5 a.m., with the stars still glinting faintly over the mountains, Elena walked quietly down the hallway and slipped the note under the door of room 1701. She didn't expect to thank you. She didn't expect anything. But she couldn't just do nothing. She returned to her room, curled under her blanket, and cried. Not just for Carson, but for Gabriel, for her brother, for the time she didn't speak up, for the moment she froze in the hospital hallway while the monitors screamed and no one listened to her panic. Now she had spoken. Too late for him. Maybe not too late for someone else. Friday morning dawned cold and gray, with snow drifting across the high peaks like powdered glass. Elena was polishing brass railings on the mezzanine when she heard the call crackle through the resort radio. Medical emergency. Guest down in suite 1701. Her stomach dropped. Without thinking, she abandoned her cart and bolted toward the elevators, ignoring the rule book, ignoring everything except the thundering of her heart in her ears. She reached the door just as the resort manager arrived, red-faced and breathless. He fumbled with his master key, and when it clicked open, Carson was on the bathroom floor, slumped against the cold tile. His face was slack on one side. His left eye barely blinked. His words came out slurred, mangled, like a language drowning in silence. "Help," he rasped. "Don't feel harm." Elena dropped to her knees beside him, calm overtaking the chaos. "Mr. Hale, I'm here. Stay still." She scanned him quickly, facial droop, one-sided weakness, confusion. Classic signs of cranial nerve involvement. It wasn't just stress. This was neurological. Advanced. She grabbed the radio clipped to her belt. "This is Reyes from sanitation. Calling 911. Suspected Lyme neuro involvement. Bell's palsy symptoms. Patient semi-conscious, slurred speech, left-side paralysis. The resort manager gawked at her, stunned. Carson, even in his daze, blinked, recognizing her voice. "You," he whispered barely. "Yes," she said gently. "Me." The paramedics arrived in under 7 minutes. Elena recited every symptom, every timeline. She handed over a folded note. She showed him the photo of his rash she had saved, taken discreetly days earlier. They didn't argue. They nodded. They listened. In the ambulance, Carson's eyes met hers again before the doors shut. This time, he didn't look at her like furniture. He looked at her like salvation. The hospital lights were too bright. Carson lay on a narrow bed in the neurology wing of Aspen Valley Medical Center, and 4 in his arm and monitors softly beeping at his side. His face remained partially paralyzed, but the antibiotics were working. Slowly, his clarity returned, not just physically, but emotionally. Dr. Sarah Chun had delivered the verdict less than an hour after admission. Stage 2 Lyme disease. Neurological involvement. Caught just in time. 1 more week, she'd said, and the damage might have been irreversible. "Who noticed the rash?" she asked while checking his vitals. Carson hesitated. He glanced at the folded piece of paper on his nightstand, the anonymous note, the careful handwriting, the urgency laced with quiet compassion. "A cleaning staff member," he finally admitted. "I don't even know her full name." Dr. Chen raised an eyebrow. "Well, she likely saved your life." Carson stared at the ceiling, the words echoing inside him. She saved your life. Not as doctor, not as algorithms, not as wealth. A woman he had told to stay in her lane. He called the resort and demanded to speak with her. But Elena was gone. After the ambulance left, she had quietly clocked out, packed her things, and turned in her badge. She hadn't planned it, but something inside her said she couldn't go back to being invisible again. She was sitting in her beat-up Toyota in the staff parking lot, hands clenched on the steering wheel. Resignation let her crumpled in her lap when headlights pulled up behind her. Carson stepped out of the car slowly, moving with caution, hospital wristband still on, hospital socks still in his shoes. "You're not supposed to be discharged yet," she said, startled. "I asked them if saving your own life earns you early release," he replied, voice soft, lopsided smile on his face. They didn't argue. She didn't know what to say. "I didn't listen to you," he continued. "You warned me, and I treated you like nothing. But you noticed what everyone else missed. You cared when no one else did." Elena's eyes filled with tears. She tried to blink away. "I'm not a doctor," she whispered. "No," he said, stepping closer. "You're something better. You're someone who pays attention. And that might be the most important thing of all." 3 months later, Carson Hale stood on the main stage of the Global Health Tech Summit in San Diego. His suit was immaculate, but what caught the attention of the 4,000 attendees wasn't his style. It was the subtle asymmetry still lingering on the left side of his face. Proof of survival and transformation. 3 months ago, he began, I almost died. Not because the disease was rare, not because treatment didn't exist, but because I believed that titles made truth. The crowd grew still. I dismissed someone who noticed what licensed professionals missed, because she didn't have a degree, because she wasn't meant to speak. He turned slightly to his right, standing at the edge of the stage, in a charcoal blazer and a simple blouse, was Elena Reyes. She took 1 step forward. Just one. But she spoke anyway. Carson continued, his voice thick, and it saved my life. The crowd erupted into applause, not because it was dramatic, but because it was true. Elena stepped to the mic. I'm not a nurse. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a health tech founder, she said. I am a person who paid attention. and maybe that should count for something. 7 minutes of standing ovation followed, longer than any keynote in the summit's history. 6 months later, Carson and Elena co-founded the Reyes Institute for Collaborative Healthcare, headquartered not far from the resort where it all began. It wasn't a hospital. It wasn't a school. It was something in between. A place where janitors, cafeteria workers, family members, teachers, and volunteers were trained to notice subtle health changes, where observation was valued alongside diagnosis. They created the first open-access diagnostic platform that allowed anyone, from a hotel maid to a grocery store clerk, to log observations and alert medical professionals. And it worked. Lives were saved. One evening, Elena stood at the window of the new training facility, watching snow fall gently across the mountain ridge. Carson entered quietly and joined her. "The CDC wants to scale the model," he said. "National rollout. They're using our system to track early-stage Lyme in high-risk counties." She turned to him, quiet awe in her eyes. "My brother would have loved this," she said. "He always believed I'd change things." Carson smiled. "You did. You are." She looked down at her badge. It didn't say doctor. It didn't say director. It said chief observer. And in the world they were building, that title meant everything. Sometimes the most powerful medicine isn't a drug. It's being seen. Sometimes the person who saves your life isn't the one with the degree. It's the one who noticed when you didn't.